Hey guys, since everyone's doing a year 2025, so I think I can do one too and then summarize a little bit of my 2025. My 2025 is an interesting one. I think materialistically speaking, it's a good one because 2024 was quite a miserable year for me. In January, so I was right now it's the People's Islamic Republic of New York, but back then it was still the capitalist of New York. So spent some time in New York and Washington DC, catching up with some old friends. Interesting, I think, is first New York is very expensive. I just remember I spent so much money eating rubbish food, like the food is not even nice, and then but I spent so much money. And then meeting people, going to workshops, and then I was in DC. But at that time, it was just when Doge fired a bunch of people and then disbanded USAT. That caused a tremendous shockwave to people working in public sector in DC, and I have some friends that were working for international organizations that had a lot of connections with the public sectors. And from what they told me, I think people didn't really like that policy at the time because that really influenced so many people. At least the friends that I met, they gave Trump and Elon Musk a disapproval. My opinion on the subject, it changed over the course of last year. Initially, I was thinking, well, when you do a public reform, you don't just kind of like cut off the entire public sector, right? And then now who's going to serve this job? So as an establishment, you do need people that are going to serve you. But over the course of last year, I discovered more and more corruptions in public sectors, which really made me think of why such a sector is so inefficient, and is it better to just cut off everything and starting fresh? But I think sometime in February or March-ish, I was in Nepal. I always wanted to go to Nepal since a long time ago, since I was 14-year-old, 15-year-old. I started reading things, spiritual things, when I was very young. But I don't think I really understood the value and the true meaning of those scriptures until recent 2 years, because I think certain discovery is something you have to go through the depths of life to truly understand. You have to really truly suffer. That made you really think about what you're doing in your life and why do you live this life? What's your relationship between yourself and you and yourself, and you and the universe, or you and the God. The most important place I went was Buddha's birthplace, Lumbini. Lumbini was amazing. Kapilavastu, which was the palace Siddhartha grew up with, was also a good visit for me. Been to many holy places, and holy places, it can have a slightly different feeling, maybe because I subjectively feel so, but also because these are places where people devote their life. People were praying so much, so you could feel that energy is a little bit different. So Lumbini, it had that calm, very peaceful energy, and then monks were doing their own thing, like praying, finding themselves, meditating. So I was very happy that I managed to make that pilgrimage to Buddha's birthplace, because if you really read Buddha's whole life, it's a very touching story. A young prince that was born too rich gave up his luxury, dealt with people, brought true knowledge and wisdom to people. It's a very much feast, because dealing with people is nasty. People may criticize you, people don't understand you, they're stupid, they can't understand you. I only have my admiration to Siddhartha as a man, but of course during the process, it doesn't matter anymore for Buddha, because he has obtained spiritual awakening. And when you attain spiritual awakening, you realize all these do not matter. And Kapilavastu was something I read so many times in Buddhist scripture, and being there, that place, you read 1 billion times. In Buddhist saying, it says, you don't have to visit those holy places, because the holy place is inside of your heart, which is true, but well, I'm a mortal human being, so I did visit those nice places. And then in April, so just went around Asia. I was in Korea a little bit. I was in Korea from time to time, because I'm always in Korea for some reasons. May, I went to Lebanon. That was also something quite interesting, because in the past 8 years, so I was around the Middle East a lot. I was at first 6-7 years, it was mainly Iran, and then later 2 or 3 years, then Saudi Arabia and the UAE, GCC countries. but that's like on the center and eastern part of it. And in between, I went to Egypt, Morocco, and Turkey 5 times. But Levant is the first time for me. So then I came to Lebanon. It was different from what I thought. I didn't expect Lebanon to be so dirty. I didn't expect Beirut to be so dirty. So I started to learn Lebanese or Levantine history. So I knew many parts of it because the whole Ottoman Empire cracked down. I knew them, but I think coming to Lebanon, it gave me this opportunity to really learn the region's history in depth and to really feel about it. While in Lebanon, I visited many older sites like Baalbek, dated back to Roman Empire time. In the south, Saida, all those Roman remains, I love them. It gave me some perspectives. First, understanding how big Roman Empire used to be. I think Roman Empire was like the United States of today, like back then. Or Britain. It's a small piece of land, but it had territory in a vast Eurasian land, and it wasn't something just in a book. On those lands, I went to so many amphitheaters, Roman remains, Roman amphitheaters, Roman columns. That's when you started to visualize, oh, that power did exist. I think the story of Roman Empire, it foreshadows a lot happening between the superpowers today, aka China and the US. When you start to interpret those power structures from the angle as an empire struggle, I think things made a lot of sense. And the second is knowing those different religions. For example, I am in Beirut, and in Beirut, it's truly this street is Muslim, that street is Christian. Or if you go to certain cities, say Syria, this street is Shia, that street is Sunni, and that street is Christian. And that street is a different type of Christian, like Maronite. It all had historical reasons. And here you could really see the tug of wars back then between the Muslims and also the Christians, aka the Crusaders. You would go to certain castles and then they're gonna tell you this was built by Crusaders, but was taken by Mamluks, by this and that. Then you could see the unfolding of history right in front of your eyes. And back then when there was no TikTok, so those remains told you the stories about the TikToks of the time. Being in a big institution, it made me really understand what a huge institution. Before I went to this organization, I had hopes, I had things I wanted to explore, but then gradually realized the structure is not made for your aspiration. But there's a structure there, you could use it. So then it was the whole month of planning or rethinking of how you can benefit from the system, using the system, making this as a launch platform for you, exploring as much as you can. In the meanwhile, understanding the irreversible crumbling of history. Sorry, it sounds a little bit abstract because I can't talk too much about this matter. It does have a little bit conflict of interest. So, and in between, I went to Syria, which was, I think, one of the best things I've done in 2025. Going to Syria, it positioned me quite close to the remains of the war. I remember 10 years ago when I was studying in the UK, we had some Syrian asylum seekers back then. And back then there was a swimmer winner, and she was telling her story how she fled the war in Syria and her family. They used to be a middle-income family, it's a well-to-do family in Syria, but they lost everything and struggled to come to the UK or Europe. Not because they wanted to, because they had a good life in Syria, but because there was a war outbreak. Then they had to go to another country they were not familiar with, like swam in the ocean and literally got to the shore, not feeling being welcome. And they didn't want to stay there. Had they have a choice, they wouldn't want to flee. Actually going there and seeing all these lives being impacted, hearing it firsthand from my tour guide, from observing people, it was a very unreal experience, a real and not real experience at the same time. Going to Palmyra and watching and seeing the remains, the crumbled remains due to ISIS rampage at the time, you really don't have anything to say about it because it's so much feeling, a lot of feelings and a lot of depths inside of your heart. I remember back then, like in 2017, when I went to Iran the first time from the United States, and my friends in the US, they thought I was crazy. They were like, "Why did you go to Iran?" And it was a terrorist country. Why would you go? But later on, of course, I started to discover that complexity, and I started telling that whole Persian story. The world is much more complicated than what we depict in black and white in some simple terms. And it will be the same thing for Syria too. Even after 8 years doing Middle Eastern studies, for 8 years before I went to Syria, I was still thinking, well, Syria, really? And especially back then, before I went, I had some dinner with some Chinese friends in Lebanon. We were talking about Syria, and they say, okay, don't go now because the Chinese embassy is gone. So if you get lost in Syria, nobody's gonna save you. When I went to Syria, and they say, my tour guide told me I was the only Chinese person in 9 months, and the sites I went, pretty much only me, maybe 1 or 2 occasional tourists here and there, but in general it was only me. You are talking about sites that used to be crammed with people long before the war, because those were historical sites. So for me, it was a breaking certain kind of stereotyping, breaking this idea what you read in book, or what you actually see in person. 25, and in between I travel a lot as well, oftentimes flying from the Middle East to Asia and going deeper into this superpower narratives and in the Middle East, continue to talk the stories of the global South. So for you guys to see me, for me to educate more people and to not think about the Middle East or stories from global South as something white and black. One little story at a time. I think moving towards the end of last year, one great thing I did was meeting someone. I think he definitely could change my life. He's much older than me, and he's much more advanced in his career than me. He's much more powerful than me as well. But the most important thing is, for me, he's a very advanced yogi. He could do many yogic things, and his thoughts and philosophy in terms of yogic mind setting. I told him, wow, all these yogic powers, I saw these things on YouTube, but I never imagined someone in real life doing it. But then he was showing me how he does that. It showed me a possibility that you could have both a very successful materialistic career in terms of power and money. In the meantime, you can also have spiritual pursuit. I had this thought that, can someone deep in the power game also have spiritual pursuit? Because how could someone that have spiritual pursuit be also involved in the game of power? It's possible, and actually quite some of them. So I guess you could say that the top elites in the world, some of them are just primitive animals, but many of them also have amazing talents in various fields, and the way they have advanced so much in their career is because they have saved their energy and they are able to see deeper into their career and into the world, and that's why they have garnered materialistic success. So let's see what's going ahead with 2026, and I want to say thank you to all of you guys here. So 2026, let's go.